Hey, it's time to spend some time with our good friend from Mercy Health. It's Dr. Dennis Norem, who's been joining us throughout this entire COVID-19 pandemic, lockdown, and all the things that go along with us, giving us some expert advice, some information, and just, kind of answering the questions that two guys sitting around here look around and go, what about this? Dr. Norem, good morning.
Good morning to you guys.
How's everything going with you this morning?
Going well. Highlighted my weekend as I got a haircut.
Nice.
Exciting.
Nice.
Exciting. Feel good?
You feel good? Yeah. Feel lighter? Feel, generally better able to move around now?
Yeah, I do feel a lot less wind resistance, and my wife says I look 10 years younger.
Oh.
She's just trying to be nice.
Nice. Yeah, Amy has indicated that it is about time for me to make that same sort of visit. So, that will be coming. Hey, a couple of notes on COVID-19 that raise an eyebrow this morning. One, the headline reading, New Zealand now says they have no active cases of COVID-19 in the country for the first time since February 28th. The last person who was being monitored for coronavirus has now been released from isolation as he's been symptom-free and is regarded as recovered. They'll announce later today if they're going to remove all social distancing and economic restrictions barring border control.
Yeah, very interesting. I think New Zealand did lock their country down very dramatically right at the beginning. So it's certainly possible that they may be not having new cases. However, I think you're going to have to wait several weeks before they can be completely sure about that. But that is interesting. But again, they were very aggressive, I think, from the beginning.
You sound skeptical of New Zealand.
I'm very skeptical when any country says, well, we have no new cases.
Okay.
Because we've talked a lot about the fact that there are a lot of asymptomatic individuals walking around, and until you've tested everybody in the country at least 2 or 3 times, I think it's difficult to say that you have no new cases.
Just to put a finer point on the asymptomatic, because we hear that expression a lot. Asymptomatic means you're not showing any of the standard. You're not running a temperature. You're not hacking. You're not doing any of those other things. Now, does that mean for someone who's asymptomatic that they probably will not come down with it? It hasn't gotten to that point yet, or it could go either way.
It could go either way, but I think the definition implies that those people will not become ill. No one will ever know that they're ill, including themselves. But we do know that they excrete virus and they can infect other patients.
The Typhoid Mary sort of scenario?
A little bit different, but kind of similar. Typhoid Mary was a little different in that she excreted the bacteria in her stool for months and months and months and infected people. I can't remember how many people she ended up infecting. Whereas with the COVID virus, it probably only is several days in an asymptomatic individual.
So just to clear it up, if you're asymptomatic, if somebody is asymptomatic, they most likely will not come down with COVID-19?
Correct. If they do, it's probably so minor, the symptoms, that they don't even realize they had it. They thought maybe I had a little cold, maybe I had a touch of the flu, but correct, they really don't have any significant symptoms.
By the way, back to Typhoid Mary for just a half second. Irish-born cook believed to have infected 53 people, 3 of whom died with typhoid fever. First person in the U.S. identified as an asymptomatic carrier of the disease. Because she persisted in working as a cook, she exposed others to the disease. She was twice forcibly quarantined by authorities and died after a total of nearly 3 decades in isolation.
Oh,
yeah, that's somebody on steroids with infectivity, but that was a very illustrative case about how diseases get transmitted in the fecal-oral route from the stool to contamination of food.
You mentioned she was a infector on steroids. I've heard the term super spreader be used about some people with the coronavirus. Is that have you heard of that? And two, is that unique to the coronavirus, or do other viruses have this kind of trait as well?
Well, I think different individuals obviously react differently, and the virus reproduces more differently, or I should say more generously in certain individuals. So I'm sure there are individuals out there who spread it much more rapidly, frequently, and for a longer period of time. I haven't heard that term super spreader associated yet with COVID virus.
Yeah, an average person with the coronavirus infects about 2 other people, but sometimes an infected person passes the virus to far more people during a super spreader event.
Yeah, and I think that's the important point you made, the event. When you get the large number of people in a very small area, somebody who is asymptomatic who is spreading virus, certainly it can spread to lots of individuals very quickly, again, in a very compacted area.
Speaking of spreading to other individuals, with the amount of protests that are going on coast to coast, well, actually globally, when you look at it, in cases you got thousands, hundreds of thousands, all these people gathered in close proximity. Is this not the recipe for a rebloom?
Well, we touched on this a little bit last week, and I think it was on the news. I swear I heard it 3-4 times a day. We're going to have outbreaks. It's going to be hot spots with all these demonstrators, and it's certainly possible. On the other hand, I'd point out that most people are wearing masks and most people are demonstrating outside, which I think decreases the ability to spread. But certainly time will tell in the next few weeks if this is going to be a significant outbreak. My other comment on that would be it's going to be difficult to tell because most states are loosening up their restrictions right now anyway, and we expect that that's going to show an uptick.
Do you predict a pretty aggressive spike coming up in about 2 weeks?
I don't think so. I think we're going to see a spike, but it's probably going to be depending on the event. In other words, I think many of these events, probably not much of a spike, but some of these events where people were really packed in, and I think over the weekend you saw some crowds that were pretty dense, you may well see some significant spikes.
I'm looking at some of the reports as far as cases go. Let's see. You've got California, Utah, Arizona, North Carolina, Florida, Arkansas, and Texas, among others, have all logged rises in confirmed cases, according to a Johns Hopkins tabulation of a 5-day moving average. Meanwhile, in New York, hardest hit by the pandemic, they've seen a drop in causes and deaths and plan to begin reopening their economy today. Here in Illinois, Connecticut, New Jersey, and as we mentioned, New York continue a decline in daily cases. Others are logging increases or remain relatively steady.
Yes, and in fact, I think I heard that New York City or the New York area did not have a single death. I believe that was New York City for the first time since this whole thing started. So they're really on the downside of the curve. And I think some of the other hot spots are mostly Midwest, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa. I've also see that there's a little bit of an uptick in Arizona. So, and some of these states obviously are behind the curve a bit. They did not have many cases at the beginning, so they're, if you will, they're catching up.
Where are we at with antibodies? The antibody test to let people know that they had it, and are we still? Is that still our that and plus a vaccine our best way to get back to quasi what we know is normal?
Well, I think the antibody testing. I know I've started to do a little bit of testing through my office. People have requested it, and I've told them that there's still a question about accuracy. It will be helpful, I think, when we are sure about the kinds of testing accuracy that we need. I think the issue still is vaccines and effective treatment. The antiviral remdesivir, I think if I pronounced it correctly, has been shown a lot of promise, but I just saw a little article said that we may run out of it here in the next few weeks because they just can't keep up manufacturing. The other thing I mentioned last week, which is technically called monoclonal antibodies, it's a type of treatment that's already in the market for treating other diseases. And there's a lot of hope that that may be an effective treatment for treating COVID-19, where they can genetically have the map for the virus, and they can make an antibody in the lab and give that to humans. So that may show a lot of promise.
One of the other ones that kind of jumped out, too, just within the last few days, over-the-counter heartburn remedy is showing some potential as a symptom reliever for COVID-19, according to a small study. Famotidine, sold under the brand name of Pepcid, appears to improve symptoms in a group of 10 patients diagnosed with COVID-19. Now, they mentioned it was a small sample, but I see a lot of different news-gathering organizations jumping on this one this morning.
Well, I think the news organizations jump on anything that shows a benefit, and you have to take that with a grain of salt when it's only 10 patients. But hopefully that does show some improvement. They're looking at some of the blood pressure drugs, so-called ACE inhibitors, which they initially thought might make things worse. Now they're doing a study on, I think one of them called losartan, to see if by blocking that angiotensin II receptor, which is what the drug does for blood pressure, will that help protect people? And there may be some benefit there.
And the other note on vaccines is Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine production has begun. 2 billion doses will be ready to go. They plan on rolling out 2 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine in September. Human trials of the Australian vaccine begin next month.
And that's very encouraging, but some of these companies may end up with a lot of vaccine that's not very beneficial, so time will tell. But I think the way vaccines are made, there's a real advantage there that they can make the doses ahead of time, even before they know if they're effective. So if they have a very effective vaccine, they'll have millions, literally millions of doses ready to go if indeed the vaccine works.
Is that how the companies do it? They kind of manufacture all the vaccines before it's proven to work?
Usually not, but this is a different animal for the vaccine companies. So they are, I think, going about this a little bit differently than usual.
Are you confident that one of these companies that is working away at it will finally come through with some sort of breakthrough on it?
Oh, absolutely. I know there are several different companies, as we've mentioned, that are working on vaccines that are slightly different. Some are very similar. You have to believe that they're going to be effective vaccines, and there's probably going to be more than one.
So let's say, let's fast forward, 2-3 months from now, however long it's going to take to get the vaccine up and ready. Who gets it? Is this going to be something that everybody just needs to go to the doctor, get vaccine? Or are we just, only at-risk people? Who will actually be getting the vaccine?
Eventually, everybody will get the vaccine.
It'll just be part of a booster shot?
Well, I think it'll be prioritized to the high-risk groups, healthcare workers initially, and then it'll be spread out as it becomes available to everyone. Obviously, that we don't have this herd immunity, and if we're going to try to create a herd immunity, we have to vaccinate literally everyone.
Is there a danger of, I'm assuming there always is, of a mutation in between, now and when the vaccine gets developed, that the vaccine that we end up getting might not be able to handle a coronavirus mutation?
Yes, that is a bit of a concern, but what I've seen is that this virus genetically is very stable. It hasn't really changed much. There's been some shifting, I think, slightly, and I'm certainly no virologist, but the virology experts are saying that it's a very stable virus, so they're very confident that by the time they get a vaccine, at least in its existing form, it will be effective. And they'll monitor that very closely as we move down the road. Now, obviously, it may do something similar to the flu, and they may have to slightly change the vaccine from time to time. But it appears this is a very stable virus genetically.
One of the things that we heard about, too, when it was colder, we heard this in March and April, that, when hot weather starts to roll around, it's going to dial this virus back a little bit. We might see it, seemingly lessen because it doesn't like hot weather. And at the same time it's getting hot, we're noticing in some places the cases are going down. Is there a tie-in between the two?
Probably not at this point in time. I think it reminds me of the H1N1 back in 2009, because generally our run-of-the-mill flus in the spring would disappear, and that one didn't. We had flu all through the summer. And I just mentioned Arizona, which has had record heat. They're seeing an uptick. So apparently, at this point in time, this virus is not behaving that way.
Well, what is the logic behind viruses, the warm weather, limiting the spread?
I don't think I have a good answer, except to say that viruses are seasonal to some extent, and some of that may have to do with the fact that we're inside more in the winter. People, are not out. They're much closer together. We're back to that sort of density thing. And as spring comes and people get out, then the virus becomes less effective. Plus, it just seems to be the way it circulates. And then we have effective treatments, so we don't have these terrible pandemics that last all year.
Dr. Norem, before we let you go here on this busy Monday, what haven't we asked you about? What have you encountered? What have you found that is worthy of mention this morning that we didn't dig up?
Well, I think still a lot of discussion about effective treatments. There's some new things on the horizon. I thought the one thing that struck me is just to show you how things go, the hydroxychloroquine controversy kind of got reared up again. One of the companies that provide data that showed that the hydroxychloroquine was causing increased deaths, their data was faulty, and a couple of major medical journals, including Lancet, retracted the study. Having said that, though, other studies have come out and say it's not effective. So it may not be killing people like it was presented here a few weeks ago.
All right. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Unless it's the aquarium-based stuff, which you should definitely stay away from. But we've learned from that news story.
Yeah, don't be taking that. That will kill you.
That will kill you. And that's a doctor telling you that will kill you. Dr. Norem, as always, we appreciate the time and the expertise. And if you're up for it, we'd like to redo this again coming up next Monday.
I'll see you guys next Monday.
Outstanding. There's Dr. Dennis Norem from Mercy Health.